Just forward.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Finn, and I want to welcome everyone to the Tuesday plenary of the JpGU-AGU joint meeting. Satish and I are so honored to serve as program committee co-chairs for this meeting, and I'm sure you share our enthusiasm and gratitude to once again be together for this special event. The challenges we face in the scientific world are more pressing than ever, making this meeting especially significant for Earth scientists to come together and address the urgent needs of our time. Working together to create a program that truly reflects the breadth and depth of our global scientific enterprise has been a true privilege for us both. We hope that the knowledge and discoveries that you're all taking in this week will power your work and make good on our meeting theme, transformative science for life and Earth.
Yes. So today we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Shang-Ping for today's Frontiers in Science lecture. Dr. Xie is a Roger Rebel professor at Scripps Institute of Oceanography, UC San Diego. He is a graduate from Ocean University of Science in Qingdao and received his PhD from Tohoku University. His research addresses such fundamental questions as how recurrent patterns of climate variability form, how predictable the climate is, and how climate will change in the face of increasing greenhouse gases. Dr. Xie was a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change IPCC, Fifth Assessment Report, which was published in 2013. He's an AGU fellow and received Swerdrup Gold Medal from American Meteorological Society in 2017. This was for his fundamental contributions for understanding the coupled ocean atmospheric feedback processes involved in climate variability and climate change. And it's a great honor that we found that he was elected as a member of the US National Academy of Sciences. So please welcome to our JpGU-AGU joint meeting stage, Dr. Shang-Ping.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Carol and Satish, for the kind introduction. And I would like to thank JpGU and AGU for giving me this opportunity to speak here on climate change science. And okay, this is my slide. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about ocean warming patterns that have become come into focus as an important scientific problem. And this work was done in collaboration with early career scientists Ayumu Miyamoto and Bo-Lan Wu from Tohoku University and Scripps Institution Oceanography. And this is the plan of my talk. So first I'm going to introduce the Pacific Ocean warming pattern, and I'm going to have some discussion on the physical mechanism origin. And then at the end, I'm going to also talk about the impacts and maybe implications for this problem. So I guess in the news lately is the forecast by various climate prediction centers for a major El Nino, not kind of average major, but like really a super El Nino might be in store in the second, maybe late part of this year. So with a central equatorial Pacific sea surface temperature anomalies, so anomalies refer to the departures from long-term climatology. For the central equatorial Pacific sea surface temperature anomalies to reach up to like 3, maybe even above 3 degrees Celsius. So 2-degree anomalies are considered to be quite major. So the forecast prediction centers are telling us there may be a really strong El Nino might be taking place. But the prediction center, at the beginning of each month, they kind of run the forecast model, the global ocean atmosphere couple model, many times with perturbed initial conditions to sample the uncertainties in observations. So, and then the spaghetti diagram, each of the lines represents one forecast with given initial conditions. So the spread of the lines tells us how confident the forecast might be. So in this case, I would say it's quite confident. The models are quite confident that they are going to be a quite strong El Nino. But as for the real magnitude, there is quite some spread from 3 degrees to 2 degrees Celsius sea surface temperature anomalies. So last time, so I guess when it looks like to me there's going to be El Nino, maybe a quite strong one, but whether it's going to reach the super category or not, I'm not sure. But anyway, so when a reasonable El Nino takes place, this is a statistical analysis is telling us various parts of the globe is going to experience anomalous conditions. In this case, showing whether the rainfall is going to increase in the wet regions and whether the rainfall is going to decrease in the dry regions. So I guess kind of well-known major anomalies like Indonesia is covered by rainforests, but during El Nino, it's so dry that wildfires could go out out of control. Whereas the Peruvian coast of the Pacific is one of the driest places on Earth. But when El Nino happens, the excessive rainfall can turn desert sand dunes into lakes. So the lake of El Nino can last for up to 2 years. So that's the kind of a transformation. And in San Diego, where I live, the wildflowers could go really wild. Like those yellow flowers are like 2 or 3 meters tall. It's just unbelievable. You can see literally the desert turning, flowering flower bed. So anyway, so those are the well-known effect of the changes in the equatorial Pacific Ocean sea surface temperature magnitude in this case. And then, in this well-known map, there is something missing. In other words, nothing was said about, El Nino basically peaks at the end of of the calendar year, but this map says nothing beyond nothing beyond post. El Nino basically dissipates by the spring, right? Spring season, but like after spring season, there are anomalies that are not displayed here, and also nothing was displayed over East Asia. That doesn't mean El Nino doesn't have influence on East Asia and doesn't have influence beyond the spring that it dissipates. That in fact, our research showed, like in the post-El Nino summer, there tend to be a planetary scale circulation developing from Indian Ocean across northwestern Pacific, and then on the northwestern flank of this circulation, rainfall tends to increase. The summer Bayou rainfall. So that's example. In July 2016, in Chinese city of Wuhan, that streets were flooded and subways are also flooded, this kind of thing. So basically, the Yangtze River is likely to experience high risk of flooding, heavy rainfall. And I guess the last time in 2023, people were scared, right? So people, reporting high temperatures around the globe, and also kind of by July of 2023, the global mean surface temperature reached the all-time record high. So, and then this warm condition lasted for another more than another 12 months. And in fact, 2023 and then 2024 consecutively set the global mean surface temperature record. And then, this led to a well-known climate scientist kind of suggesting, he was saying, this could imply that the warming planet is already fundamentally out of control. So, but it turns out you don't need an extra recipe, but El Nino basically during and after El Nino, the tropical sea surface temperature would rise a little bit than normal, and that seems to be enough to push 2023 and 2024 as consecutive high in terms of global surface temperature anomalies. So this is what happened, when the last time there was strong El Nino, 2023, 2024. And of course, on the background, when we hear so often that the surface temperatures are setting records in various parts of the world in different seasons, and even the global mean surface temperature, I guess basically this rising trend is what responsible for so many records are being set. And of course, what drives this rising trend in global temperature on the multi-decadal timescales is due to anthropogenic release of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. And when the planet warms, we would experience very scary Wi-Fi conditions, and also just off coast of Japan, in 2023-24, people reported ocean temperature anomalies of 6 degrees Celsius. So that's I never heard of anything like this, but yeah, that happened. And then the global mean temperature. There's very little doubt, and the scientific community has come to a strong consensus. The global mean temperature rise is indeed due to the rapid increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. But then, of course, under the global greenhouse gas forcing, the surface temperature is going to increase almost everywhere, except maybe subpolar North Atlantic. But then, although the surface temperature increases everywhere, but the warming magnitude, the rate of warming varies from one place to another. So that warming, the warming pattern, the spatial pattern of the warming, is what we are going to focus today. So that turns out to be much more complicated, as we will see just in a bit. In the pioneer, about 35 years ago, Dr. Manabe, who won the physics Nobel Prize in 2021, they developed the global dynamic ocean and a global atmospheric model, and they coupled the models together, and then they increased gradually the atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration, and then they already studied the ocean warming pattern. And in one of the early paper, like 30 years ago, so they were kind of projecting the warming everywhere, but like the eastern equatorial Pacific is going to experience enhanced warming compared to the rest of the tropical Pacific. So that is because the west, the east is warmer than the west. So that's going to drive wind changes from the cooler region into warmer region. So that they were also predicting a westerly wind. So westerly means the winds of coming from west, right? So westerly wind anomalies would blow towards the enhanced warming region of eastern equatorial Pacific. So that is maybe the first study of the ocean warming pattern over the tropical Pacific. So and then you might wonder why the eastern equatorial Pacific would be warming faster than the rest of the tropics. That turns out to have to do with so-called thermal damping of the ocean. So carbon dioxide is basically distributed uniformly spatially. So, but the thermal under that surface forcing, surface heating, right? The oceanic thermal damping timescale is proportional to the evaporation rate. And evaporation in the eastern equatorial Pacific, because the cold temperature and other conditions, is the smallest in the tropical oceans. So that explains under the same CO2 forcing, the eastern equatorial Pacific, the cold time just means it's cold along the equator. So over that cold region, the currently cold region is going to experience the largest warming under the CO2 forcing. So this is what people call like El Nino-like warming, right? Because the eastern Pacific is extra warming extra amount compared to the western, the rest of the tropics. So that looks like El Nino. So this is El Nino-like trend, right? And then, the paper Dr. Manabe published was like 1995, so that's 30 years ago. But now people have updated the analysis of surface warming rate in the global ocean. So this is the latest model simulation, 16 different models, kind of upon averaging across the 16 models, you see kind of the warming is indeed in models enhanced in the eastern equatorial Pacific compared to the Indo-Western Pacific. And then the surface atmosphere, surface pressure distribution tells us the winds are from the wind change is from the west. So that westerly wind anomalies are going to deepen the ocean thermocline and suppressing the equatorial ocean upwelling. So both are going to contributing to the eastward enhanced warming across the equatorial Pacific. So this sounds consistent. So since Dr. Manabe's work 30 years ago in models, generations of global climate models have shown basically the results supporting this eastward enhanced El Nino-like warming pattern. But then people turn to observations, right? Of course, observations over remote oceans are tricky just because at any given time you don't have so many ships out there. But the satellite is a game changer, right? So satellites sample the globe everywhere the same way. So and the satellite sampling and accuracy. So people feel confident during the satellite era. Nominally, we consider started in around the year 1980s. Yeah. So people have mapped the sea surface temperature warming pattern during this so-called satellite era. right? So basically the past 40 years or so. And look, and people say, look, the models are getting it wrong, right? So the models are telling us the Eastern Equatorial Pacific should warm faster. But in fact, the satellite data indicates that's where the least warming is being observed in the tropical oceans, right? So we're in trouble. And I want you to kind of remember, when this is, so people call this a La Nina-like warming pattern, or La Nina-like sea surface temperature pattern, referring to a reduced warming, maybe even slight cooling, despite the increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. So with this La Nina-like SST pattern, the atmospheric pressures in the Aleutians in the Gulf of Alaska tends to increase a lot more than in models. So this is a feature that turns out to be important when we talk about the marine heat waves off the coast of Japan. So anyway, so now we are in trouble, right? So one of the scientists said over 80% of the latest models project an erroneous El Nino-like trend. So on the face value, of course, the observation is always true, right? So the models, always flawed, or always the things, could go wrong. But the question I want to ask is are really model erroneous, right? That there could be other explanations, and in fact, the other explanations seem to be more reasonable to me. And I hope at the end of the talk, you will somewhat agree with me. Yeah. Okay, so this is, I guess, when models are being run to predict El Nino or to project the future climate change. So we run a bunch of models, and for each model, we also kind of we force the model with a best estimates of historical atmospheric compositions, carbon dioxide, methane, aerosols, whatever you can think of. So this we call like a radiative forcing, just because more CO2, it traps more radiation, right? And then for a given model, you run a model a bunch of times because the ocean atmosphere coupled system is chaotic. So you have to consider the chaotic variability. That has nothing to do with your external forcing. So when you analyze one single realization of your model, your results are going to include two distinct components. One is radiative forced by CO2 and other composition changes. And the second component is the internal, we call internal chaotic variability. So that El Nino is one type of such chaotic internal variability. It occurs for no reasons, right? It just, every few years, El Nino would occur. Yeah. Anyway, so I guess if you run a model a bunch of times, by averaging the results from this ensemble, right? So because each ensemble member is subject to the same radiative forcing. So if you average the ensemble, you got a so-called forced response, right? So that's what we want to know. And also, the differences among the ensemble members then would represent this internal variability that's supposed to have random phase, right? Yeah. So this is a brief introduction, ensemble forecast, ensemble projection, right? Because next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So again, we are showing the apparent discrepancy between observed warming pattern versus model simulated warming pattern. So the El Nino-like was La Nina-like in observations. So and people have studied the east-west gradient change associated with the historical simulation. And then, the La Nina-like pattern would imply increased east-west surface temperature gradient. So keeping that in mind, so the people call this a violin diagram. So each violin represents one model, right? And the dots represent the ensemble members. So you run the model a couple of times, right? And then these are the observations. So observations are showing positive values, indicating the east-west gradient of ocean warming increases over the past 40 years. But I would draw your attention to, quite a few models actually, their member runs actually hit the observational mark. So in other words, the chaotic variability, at least as a possibility to explaining the discrepancy, because observation is just one shot. We don't have an alternative universe. So that is, at least we believe, right? So observations could include internal chaotic variability that would show maybe the difference between the ensemble average, that's forced response, whereas observations include both forced response and internal variability. And then, just as a quick reminder, right? So observations for El Nino, the difference between El Nino and La Nina would have a global influence on many different variables, impact, right? And this is, I'm just showing the tropical cyclone genesis and track dense, tracks would vary tremendously from El Nino to La Nina. So in other words, between this and their futures, we're going to see completely different organization of tropical storms, hurricanes. So that's what is in stake. Yeah. Okay. So okay. So now I think people have been raising the awareness of this apparent conflict or discrepancy for past few years, and some even call this the most important climate dynamics problem of our time, just because a lot are in stake, and a major barrier to useful scientific research is we didn't have a good numerical models that can simulate the observed warming pattern. So the models can because any model simulations you need a forcing, and your model might be wrong in some ways in depicting forcing or internal variability. So that's what we try to tear out. So we actually happen to have a tool that can be used to simulate observed ocean warming pattern. So the way we did it is we take a typical global climate model that includes a fully dynamical ocean model and three-dimensional atmospheric model. And then the model exchange heat at the interface, and also the atmosphere through the wind, because when it blows wind is going to provide drags on the surface ocean. So that's going to create ocean currents. So in fully coupled climate model, the wind stress is interactive with the ocean conditions, right? So we don't have control over how the wind stress is going to vary. But in our experiment, we can override this model wind stress with observed wind stress, right? So we're just telling, maybe in 1997, the trade winds are weaker. So that is in observation record. We use the observed wind stress to drive this climate model. So in addition to anthropogenic radiative forcing, we're now providing observed history of wind stress. So this we call wind stress pacemaker experiment. So because we use the observed wind stress to pace the global climate system. So you know, when we analyze the pacemaker experiment and compare with observations, so this is the same equatorial Central Pacific sea surface temperature anomalies. So the red is the model pacemaker experiment. The black is observations. So they are almost one-to-one. So this tells us, you know, we got the tool, you know, because we now can simulate the observations. We can compare observation with our model simulation year by year. Basically, you know, 1998 we can compare the model observation in 1998 and so on. So and the correlation coefficient is above like 0.9. So this is a truly a remarkable simulation skill. So of course then we thought maybe you can simulate the multi-decadal trends in observations. And indeed it did, yeah. So this is observed the sea surface temperature trend over the past 40 years, right? So the red is enhanced warming, and in observations, indeed, we see this reduced warming in the eastern equatorial Pacific, and the reduced warming is associated with a strong acceleration of the trade winds blowing from east, right? And then you have like a southerly winds blowing across the equator. And this is our pacemaker simulation, right? So you can see by yourself. I think they're very remarkably similar, in particular in terms of reduced warming and enhanced trade wind speed, and also, you know, note the region, the Pacific, North Pacific east of Japan is displaying strong warming, and the same thing for the observation for model. And then I would also kind of point out the anticyclonic circulation, right? The clockwise, the wind anomalies. Oh, running out of time. Oh, okay. So I need to wrap up really quick. So this is the pacemaker experiment, right? And then this is the model result if we don't provide the observed wind stress, right? So then, you know, it's very smooth and flat, and not much wind to talk about. And then you do see, you know, a little El Nino-like structure, but very different from observation from the pacemaker experiment. So there is a distinction between the force. In other words, you know, this is already telling us, you know, the observed La Nina-like pattern is not due to a radiated forced response, but it's most likely due to internal chaotic variability. And this is a view, you know, looking to the surface variables, but you know, more informative is the vertical transect across the equatorial Pacific. So this is the depth, right? And then these are the wind anomalies in arrow. So this is the enhanced trade winds, and the enhanced trade winds are going to piling up the warm water in the west. So the thermocline gets deeper, and therefore the deeper the thermocline represents subsurface ocean temperature increase. So that's why you see a huge warming in the western subsurface thermocline level. And then the model does a very good job, right? So, and then if you go to compare with the force run without wind stress, then it's very flat and a completely different structure. You especially don't see the western subsurface warming because the winds are very, very, very calm. You know, the wind hardly change. Yeah. So this tells us, oh, okay, so I guess this tells us the Western Pacific subsurface temperature might be something important, dynamical indicator of the state of equatorial Pacific Ocean climate. So we did a simulation over how many years, like 70 some years, right? So I'm showing the full record. The observation in black, and the red is our pacemaker experiment, and the green is from the forced experiment without pacemaking. So, and you just can see, the red and black, they're almost identical. So telling us that the pacemaker is really working. And an important point also is in the Eastern Equatorial Pacific, the thermocline hardly moves in vertical for reasons I don't have time to go into. Okay. Yeah, so maybe this will be the most important figure. So CO2 has been increasing, ever since record began, right? And then this is our satellite era from 1982 onwards. So during that period, the Pacific internal oscillation, tropical Pacific decadal variability, displayed a major phase shift. So that's to cool the tropical Pacific Ocean. So that coincides with a well-known phenomenon called the global surface warming hiatus of the 2000s. So that is responsible for both La Nina-like warming pattern and a temporary hiatus of the global mean surface temperature. And then you might be curious, right? So what happened before this? What happened before this is the phase transition of opposite sign, right? So that was responsible for something people have been studying in the 90s and 2000s called the climate regime shift of 1970s. So that was a hot topic, but now a lot of people seem to have forgotten this climate regime shift. So that pushes the tropical Pacific into warm state. Yeah, okay, I'll skip this for the lack of time. Yeah, okay, so that is basically, the theme of this year's JpGU is life and Earth, right? So I have to say something about life. I didn't make the connection earlier, but now I want to make a connection to my own life, right? So this is an early beginning of satellite era, and that is now. So you can see the effect of these 4 decades. And then, of course, 40 years are a long time for our life, not to mention career, right? So, but I think, in this case, a lot of people, they thought 40 years are long enough to detect the ocean warming pattern, right? I'm saying, the global mean temperature is already risen above the noise level. But the warming pattern apparently has not emerged from the internal variability. As I've been showing here, 40 years are long, but not, I guess, climate kind of views things probably at a much longer time scale. So we have to be careful what we're looking at. So my summary is La Nina-like pattern. It's most likely due to internal variability that caused so-called global warming hiatus of 2000s. So there's a specific time and phase shift that happened on this Earth. And then, if what I said is what I concluded was true, then this internal, the cyclic internal variability is, the clock is going to swing the other way. So that when that happens, we are going to see a El Nino-like warming pattern. And this El Nino-like warming pattern might persist into a distant future, just because apparently the models are telling us that. Of course, we have to keep in mind, models are always flawed, but they are sometimes useful. Okay, so I just stop here. So main message is the past doesn't equal the future. So that is, you have to be very careful to tease out various components we have to consider, in this case, 40 years are not long enough to see the warming pattern, the true forced warming pattern. So nature always surprises us, especially when we feel we understand, but we only understand a small portion of nature has in store. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Now we're going to switch to a kind of fireside chat, if you will. Hot chat.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Yeah, wonderful talk. Thank you so much. So you started your career in Tohoku University.
Yeah.
Now you are also involved in WPI. So how do you feel transforming for the past 40 years? Yeah.
Yeah, as Satish said, actually, I have a strong connection to Japan and Tohoku University, especially. I came to study for my graduate degree in 1985. So that's even 50. Oh no, 40.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, the beginning of the satellite era, of course. Yeah, so at that time, I was lucky. I chose to study, the coupled ocean-atmosphere interactions. So that seemed to be something, new. That perspective was new at the time, because the meteorology was a science that has forecast the weather, right? Helped us forecast weather. And then physical oceanography, people hardly knew what is the physical oceanography. So I told my parents, it's about ocean currents. They said, why you should care? Yeah, but now, as you have seen in my talk, the movements of the ocean are actually in control of the rhythm of the climate. So I thought, I was lucky. And of course, the physical oceanography laboratory at the Tohoku University at the time, all my classmates and lab members, they were, we were basically teaching each other about the climate dynamics. And that atmosphere, carried us. Many of us were, I think it turns out to be quite good, And I think, I was lucky at the time and place to be in Tohoku. We were not expert in climate science, but we were able to teach each other to get to the forefront of climate science. Yeah, so that yeah, that was I'm very grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
So what drives specific decadal variability, and how is it actually different from El Nino?
Yeah, so El Nino is maybe the first phenomenon people studied very closely in terms of ocean-atmosphere coupling. So El Nino is an oceanic phenomenon because it refers to ocean warming, right? But in order for oceanographers to create El Nino, you need to provide the wind variability. So the wind variability is, of course, in other words, if you give me the winds, I will give you El Nino. And the meteorologist will say, give me the ocean temperature, I will give you the winds, right? So it's a chicken and egg problem. So that start, and also El Nino, the cycle between El Nino and La Nina happens to be like 2 to 7 years. It's still kind of a long time compared to the weather cycle. The weather cycle is like 5 to 7 days, right? So every week you see a new weather showing up on your doorsteps, but you have to wait 5 to 7 years to see the next El Nino. So of course, we have a much smaller number of El Nino to study. But the year I entered the graduate school, that was the time Mark Kane at the Columbia University successfully predicted the El Nino for the very first time. So that, in other words, the El Nino cycle is like interannual, right? 5 years maybe on average, whereas the decadal variability is a few decades. And we know the El Nino dynamics much better, so we know what initial conditions you need to input to the coupled ocean atmosphere model. So you can predict El Nino, when the El Nino is going to come, and how big the El Nino might be. But for decadal variability, first of all, we have very few observed samples we can study. So, and also, I think maybe partly because that we don't understand the decadal variability. I think not only by a little, but by a mile. It's just we just don't know the decadal variability that well. So that puts us into a position, I guess at this point, people thought, if you can predict decadal variability, then the next stop is climate change, right? So you have a smooth, seamless connection from interannual variability like El Nino all the way to climate warming. But I think what's in between is the decadal variability, and decadal variability seems to be the weakest link in climate dynamics and prediction, unfortunately, at this point. Right. Yeah.
In your talk, you were focusing on internal or natural variability played an important role. But how do you think the anthropogenic causes or warming?
Yeah. So that is So when I wrote the paper, right? So I was actually careful because I don't want people to mistake, right? So a major conclusion is the warming pattern, the spatial variation of the warming doesn't seem to have emerged. Still too weak for us to tell precise what kind of pattern are going to show up, 50 years from now. In addition to, the humanity may decide to change course, right? Limiting, EV and switch rooftop
solar panels.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, but I think the warming itself, there's no doubt it must be induced by anthropogenic greenhouse gases. But the spatial variations, the spatial variation or the spatial pattern is the next order of the problem, because it's not warming. Of course, warming itself drives many changes in our climate system, but the spatial variation of the warming is what drives the winds and atmosphere circulation. So that is hugely important, right? Like in the monsoon region, it's the winds that are carrying the water vapor and deciding where and how much rainfall you're going to dump. So in that sense, spatial pattern of the warming is no less important than the warming itself. So, but unfortunately, when you come to spatial variations, then we have this internal chaotic variability that will show up. So Carol's question about decadal variability, that's why decadal variability shows center on the stage, right? Just because and the warming is big enough for us to detect, but the spatial variation of the warming are still hidden in the internal variability. Yeah. Because it's much smaller, a little bit smaller, but the gradient is what drives the winds. So that is why I'm saying it's smaller, but no less important.
So you focused on the satellite era post that early picture of you. How were sea temperatures measured before that, and how do satellites measure sea temperatures?
Yeah, so I went, when I was a student, both undergraduate and graduate school, I went to cruises, right? So you basically I was deployed as laborers on scientific expeditions. So we would, on the front deck, we would throw a bucket into ocean, right? And then we would pull up our bucket, and you have to read it really quickly because the evaporation will reduce your water temperature, and your bucket is only that big. So we kind of carefully, maybe Ando-san and I went on the research cruise. Maybe he will pull up the bucket. I will have my thermometer ready to read, right? So that is how surface temperatures were measured over a very long period of time. And then the satellite came along. The atmospheric radiation, atmosphere contains water vapor and other greenhouse gases. Especially the water vapor is a very strong greenhouse gas. So, but fortunately, in the infrared, because ocean, is ocean, the radiation ocean emits is in the long wave range, the infrared range. But because there's absorption spectrum, there's people call atmospheric window. So, in a narrow spectrum window, the infrared can escape from ocean surface unimpeded, in the absence of clouds, of course, and then escape into space. So if you have a radiometer tuned at that wavelength, you can see all the way ocean surface temperature. So that's very clever way of reading the surface temperature through the atmosphere window. So in those windows, the water vapor is, it's not that effective in impeding absorbing the infrared radiation. So that is, why satellite really made a difference in globally sample, surface temperatures, both over the ocean and over land. Yeah.
That's a major advance of measuring the temperature. So how deep it can go to the ocean, or whether satellites can help you to measure the deeper temperatures?
So I guess infrared radiation can capture people call like skin temperature, maybe a few millimeter, maybe at most a few centimeter of. Because the ocean is a strong absorber of electromagnetic waves. So you cannot see beneath the ocean that much from the satellite. So the way you measure the ocean temperature below the surface is through a thermometer, very sophisticated thermometer. I wouldn't have time to explain, but that's what we did, on research cruises. And nowadays, of course, the water temperature is measured electronically. So people call it CTD, right? So see conductivity, temperature, depth, probe. And now I guess for those thermometers, you still need to deploy ships. The ships are very expensive to deploy. So people devised autonomous floats. So you throw into water, and then they will dive to like two kilometers below the surface, and then the floats are then gradually surface to the ocean surface and transmit the readings to the satellites. Yeah. So now I guess working with the graduate students, they would say, when I say, we need to look into this temperature, or I will go to download the data. But so as if computers can generate
templates.
Yeah, nowadays things are too easy in that sense.
So fish. It's a big protein here. Sashimi, sushi is very popular globally. How do all of these physical changes you described in your talk affect ecosystems and fisheries?
Yeah, so I'm from San Diego, so Southern California is a place of strong upwelling, so you have a lot of biological activity, a lot of fish. And then people noticed between El Nino and La Nina, different fishes come to, some fish come to the coast during El Nino, where some other fish wants to come to near the coast during La Nina because they have preference for temperature. And then during El Nino, people would catch fish they usually can find only in Mexico, off the coast of Mexico. And sometimes, people in the Pacific Northwest, like in Portland or Seattle, they would catch fish. Normally you only see in California. So that kind of in a sense, the cycle of fish oscillations, right? So that is between El Nino and La Nina well measured and to some extent well understood. And of course, Japan is a rich fishing ground, and people have documented various modes of variations of different fish species. And I ran out of time, but there was a few slides I wanted to mention. In other words, my graduate alma mater at Tohoku University, so they started a kind of a WPI's World Premium Institute initiative. So they started this research institute with a specific focus on the climate change impact on marine ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So I hope maybe in a few years, some young people from that institute could tell us more about this connection between the physical change and ecosystem change, all the way to the fisheries. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Shang-Ping.
Thank you.
This was, I learned a lot. So let's give him another round of applause. So we're very lucky that we've had this plenary and we have several more. So tomorrow, please join us here, same place, same time, 12:30, for the leadership lecture with Dr. Karen Marquides and her titled talk, Leadership Disruption to Overcome Destruction, Forging System-Wide Responses to Our Climate Culture Crisis. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.